So now I can start. So as Daniel introduced me, I'm Filip Rakowski. I'm a co-founder of Vue Storefront, and an obvious follow-up question to that is like, how many of you heard about Vue Storefront? Please raise your hand. Yeah, that's okay, like 1/3. The rest we'll learn in a moment. So I'm also a member of the Technology Council of Mach Alliance. How many of you heard about Mach Alliance? Did anyone? Oh, some of you did. Nice. Yeah, Mach Alliance is basically an organization of enterprise e-commerce companies that are willing to push the composable and headless movement forward, because as you can imagine, it is quite hard to promote new things among the enterprise customers. So, you know, we had to form some kind of an alliance and push it together. And it is kind of working, and I'm kind of helping. So that would be it about that. And now Vue Storefront. So. For those who already know, you know. But for those who don't know, Vue Storefront is a set of developer tools or a framework which is open source, and we started in 2017, and our goal is quite simple. We want to accelerate and we want to simplify really the development of e-commerce storefronts. It is quite complex things. It requires multiple layers. We have UI library, we have like a middleware. We have also the storefronts themselves. And the goal here is basically you're taking what we are offering you, you're slightly customizing it, and you're having a ready-to-use composable or headless setup for your e-commerce platform. It doesn't really matter what e-commerce platform you're using. You can use Vue Storefront with that, and obviously it is running on Next, because this is the best framework. So, and we were actually the first PWA and the first headless e-commerce storefront in the world as a product, which is, I think, quite a nice achievement. And it feels like really ages has passed since then. 2017, like it was a completely different world before COVID. And one of our selling points is performance. And obviously we're having a lot of discussions with our customers about it, and a lot of them think that performance equals Lighthouse score. So how many of you actually is using Lighthouse? Okay, a lot of you. This is good, because I don't need to explain what it is. So, as I said, a lot of our customers think that performance equals Lighthouse score, and it is not as easy as that. It's actually much more complex. For example, do you think this website has good or bad performance? Like, who thinks the performance is good? Who thinks the performance is bad? Who thinks it's average? Okay, yeah. It's a safe answer. So I won't answer this question yet, but at the end of this talk, I think you will know by yourself if this is good or bad. So let's get into this topic, into like the main topic of this presentation. So in our industry, performance is one of the most important things really to look at. Of course, it's not the most important, like a lot of people would like it to be the most important. I think it's maybe the third most important thing to look at. And the slower your website is, the more important thing it is to look at, definitely. But in general, performance equals money. So Amazon, this huge e-commerce company, and also the one that is selling some servers, they did a study on that topic, and what they learned is that basically every 100 milliseconds added to the page load costs 1% in revenue. So for Amazon, this is really millions of dollars. And the bigger your business is, the more important the performance is. It probably doesn't matter that much if you have like a small e-commerce website. What matters for you in that case is basically to sell things and for stuff to work. But the bigger your business is, the more those tiny improvements matter. By the way, speaking about numbers, if you need a good source of arguments for your boss to actually convince them to optimize performance, if you work at a company that is actually working with clients that make a lot of money for their website, check out the WPO stats, which is an acronym from Web Performance Optimization Stats. You will have a great insights on how optimizing performance actually affected businesses and business-related metrics in many companies. So, it feels kind of crazy from today's perspective, where all of you raised hands, almost all of you raised hands when I asked what is Lighthouse. But 6 years ago, so when we were writing the first lines of code for Vue Storefront, the topic of front-end performance was kind of non-existent. in the web dev space. And at that time, JavaScript single-page applications frameworks were just gaining traction. So AngularJS and React, they were already well-established tools, especially AngularJS, gaining the popularity basically every day. It was a wave of SPA at that time. And Vue was just getting the attention of the broader developer community. I still remember when I was attending the events and there was a Vue.js talk. This was a room, you know, always filled with the same people. Right now it's a little bit different. And almost no one cared how fast the frameworks, the websites built with those frameworks were. And of course, now everyone say that putting so much JavaScript on the front end was a mistake. But it wasn't that obvious at that time. Because the issues that we are seeing right now with the performance of single-page applications, they're not coming from the framework themselves. They're kind of coming from the ecosystem. And who could predict that if you deliver JavaScript-first tools, the ecosystem will also include more JavaScript, and you could have performance issues, right? Absolutely no way. So, as long as we're using PCs and laptops as our primary machines to consume the web, no one seemed to be very much concerned about the performance issues of single-page applications. You know, both CPU and internet bandwidth, they were accelerating. They're progressing faster than websites were growing their size. But everything has changed when mobile phones started to be primary way of consuming the web. And according to Google research in 2017, which is still, you know, a beginning of an era of single-page applications, it took an average 15 seconds to fully load a web page on a mobile phone. 15 seconds. It is that long. So as you have just seen on the previous image, the size of those applications keeps growing. So right now it is actually much worse. So that time, the awareness about the impact of poor mobile performance on the business metrics and basically on the conversion and this sort of things just started to emerge. And we're still lacking kind of like an easy way to link those two components, so performance and business metrics. And everything changed when Google Lighthouse started gaining popularity. So this very tool that we all almost know. So I remember when it was first introduced, and it became really rapidly adopted, really extremely rapidly adopted in the e-commerce space, following also the progressive web applications hype that happened around 2018. Lighthouse, I think, is a little bit younger, but 2018 was actually making it accessible to wider audience with other page speed tools. So everyone, they were obsessed about progressive web applications. There was a PWA panel on every e-commerce event, or not only e-commerce event, also Google roadshows about that. Everyone were obsessed with web performance. And the thing is, no one knew anything about that. And I have a feeling that, unfortunately, not much has changed since then. So what actually makes Lighthouse so widely adopted? Why we all raise hands? Is it because Google was promoting that? Yeah, that might be one of the reasons. But I think the reason why it is so widely adopted is its simplicity. Like, you run a test, you get a number between 1 and 100. That tells you how good or how bad, usually, unfortunately, is the performance of your website. And everyone, even the ones without any technical understanding or any technical background, can understand that number. And I think this is the root of the whole problem. Because the reality, well, it's still the same slide, never mind. Okay. The reality is not that simple. The web performance or user experience, it really cannot be boiled down to just a single number or even a bunch of single numbers. In addition, there are a lot of nuances around the Lighthouse itself that we'll soon learn how it works, that you really have to be aware of, because otherwise this number is extremely misleading. So we will navigate through those nuances, and at the end of this talk, you'll be able to answer with full confidence if this first slide that you have seen with the number, if this is a good performance or bad. So let's start with a simple question. What does Google Lighthouse actually measure? And how we can use that information? So I have a feeling that many people don't try to answer this question. They kind of assume that, you know, the score has to be high to be good, and that's it. And, well, that's not true. So, as we can read on the website of Google Lighthouse, What it is doing, it is measuring page quality. And the audit divides page quality into 4 categories. So there's performance, there's accessibility, there are best practices, there's also an SEO. And all of those combined, in theory, they should give you a very good perspective on the quality of the website, and by that, also try to accurately predict what would be the experience of your users. And try to predict is a keyword here, because no audit will give you any information if the experience of your users will be good or bad. They can give you some indication. And Google always promoted the performance score as the most important one on every event, but also, you know, some GDEs and also Google employers, they were always talking about the performance score as the most important one. And in the heads of general audience, Lighthouse score equals performance score. So quality page means page with good performance, right? And don't get me wrong here, I think performance is extremely important metric or a bunch of metrics, and it definitely contributes to the quality of your website, to the experience of your users. But you know, this is just one of many metrics, and you shouldn't get a false impression that this is actually what matters the most, and this is something that is driving the experience of your users. In reality, there are so many different factors influencing good user experience that even 4 Lighthouse metrics, all of them, if you max them out to 100%, you can't have a definitive answer if this is a good experience. And I assure you, the best way to start improving experience is actually talking to your users or collecting data from your real users instead of looking at synthetic numbers. And you'll be very surprised because you will learn that their experience is usually completely different from what you have assumed. And also they're using your application in a completely different way that you have assumed. If anyone here is building products or working also as on the product side, you know that very well. So if you want to use the data from Lighthouse in your decision-making process, you need to put it in the right context. Because without knowing the context, it's very easy to make very bad decisions that logically could make sense, but in reality, if we drill a little bit in the underlying conditions, it doesn't make sense at all. And I think a great example of that is BMI, body mass index. Who knows? We had that in primary school, so I know it pretty well. I'm not sure how it is in different countries. So just looking at this scale, does 30 BMI means that you're obese? Raise your hand if you think so. Raise your hand if you don't think so. Raise your hand if you don't have an opinion. Okay, I'm just checking. So if we look at this chart, we can say with full confidence that, yeah, it kind of means. But when we dig into the details, when we read how this body mass index work and how the results should be interpreted, we actually learn that this scale doesn't work for a very large amount of people like women, older adults, muscular individuals. The interpretation for them is different, but it doesn't end here. The interpretation is also different for children and adolescents. So the only group that actually comes to mind that actually fits into this BMI algorithm are non-muscular, middle-aged males. So this is what body mass index is for. So the initial result could lead you to really bad decisions like ruining your health and getting skinny at all costs if you don't dig into those specific details. And it's exactly the same with Lighthouse, but it could get worse. This kind of thinking could lead you to real disasters. For example, you could have a temptation to ban the worldwide cheese consumption. And by doing that, stop horrible things from happening. So this is a real correlation. Like this is how it works. This is just a number. It means nothing. So let me quickly explain how the Lighthouse score is calculated to make sure that we're all on the same page. And Lighthouse score, even though it is a single number, it is actually calculated from a bunch of other metrics. And each of those metrics has its own weight. So some of them are more important, some of them are less important. Also, if you're improving your Lighthouse score, it actually makes sense to focus on certain metrics more than the others because it will give you a better benefits in the number itself. But you should never optimize the number. Also, the algorithm changes with each version. And as far as I remember, there are already 11. Yes, 11, Daniel? Versions of Lighthouse? Yeah, I think so. And this is nothing unusual. The more Google explores the impact of individual metrics on user performance, the more they're able to adjust it and the more accurate they are in predicting the user experience. And this is why it absolutely makes no sense to compare your Lighthouse score from, like, let's say 2 years ago to the Lighthouse score that you have right now, because the thing is, you could have exactly the same website, nothing could change, and the score would change. So the score could change because the algorithm has changed, not because you changed something to the better or worse. And this is actually something that happened at the beginning of the Google Lighthouse score existence. So the first iterations of the algorithm, they're actually giving you a great score on almost every occasion. And then all of that dropped completely. And we had customers that were coming to us and they were saying like, oh, we had 80 Lighthouse score, and right now we have 60. What was the point of migrating to Vue storefront and headless? And good luck with explaining that. So we already know how the score is calculated, but the truth is, this is like half of the success, because the number could be completely different depending on in which environment you run it. And this is another bias that you need to be aware of. So most people use Google DevTools to run their Lighthouse audits. How many of you does this? Come on. So this is probably the worst way of doing that and the least reliable. There are multiple external factors that influence the score. So the download and rendering speed, it really depends on your CPU and network power. The developers will also usually run those tests on shiny MacBook Pros with 5G network, 16 gigabytes of RAM, maybe some other cool additions. Also, your browser's extensions, they are also treated as part of the website that you're running it on. For example, you have Grammarly. If you look at the source, you will even see that Grammarly is actually including an HTML tag at the very bottom of your page. So you're not only testing the website, you're testing the website and all of your Chrome extensions. So we can decrease the impact of those factors by running the test in incognito mode, which is removing all the browser extensions. Also by applying CPU throttling, which is kind of normal in Lighthouse score, but you will still see different results. So do the test. Apply the throttling, run it in the incognito mode. Take 5 people from your company, run exactly the same test. I guarantee you will have completely different results, because I did that test. You can have much more consistent results if you just eliminate the factor of the machine that you're running it into, and you can use something called, Lighthouse CI, for example, or use PageSpeed Insights. PageSpeed Insights is actually a very nice way of doing that, and this is something I would recommend. So this is a website made by Google itself. And what you can do there is you can put an URL to perform a quick Lighthouse test on any website remotely using Google Data Center instead of your local machine. So what it will do, where it will run it, it will use the data center that is closest one to your location, but not always the same one, but sometimes it will actually use a different one. For example, if the one that you previously used or that is closer to your location is occupied. And this is why you could sometimes get slightly different results. But this is not only reason why you could get slightly different results, because usually your websites are using APIs. Those APIs could have different response times. And this could also, influence your score. So there's really there's no point in nitpicking like, 2, 3, 4 delta in the Lighthouse score. You should look at this more holistically, do a lot of tests, maybe, take the average. And even though the PageSpeed Insight score will be more consistent, it is still far from being an accurate measurement of real user experience, because it is still a syntactic metric. So PageSpeed Insights will run the mobile Lighthouse test on emulated budget Motorola G4. And unless all of your users are using budget Motorola G4, this is not how they're going to experience your website. The good news is PageSpeed Insights will actually tell you also how your users are experiencing the website. So the score at the top are actually Core Web Vitals, and also 3 other important metrics like interaction to next paint, which will actually replace one of the Core Web Vitals, I think in March next year. So it is worth looking at. And those numbers, those 3 metrics, they are impacting SEO. So what happens is actually if you have them at green, which is like 75th percentile is good of the users that are visiting your website, then you will have a slight SEO boost from each metric individually. And it is collected, as far as I know, from the last 28 days via Google Chrome browser. So if you're actually entering any website, the data is also collected from you. Another problem with Lighthouse is that it is just an algorithm. So it takes input, it does some magic, and it gives us the output. And if we know how it works, it is super easy to cheat that. And actually, it is much more common than you would think. And it's much easier than you would think. For example, you can easily find a lot of articles like this one showing how to build a website that is getting a perfect Lighthouse score in, let's say, accessibility, and is completely not accessible. And when it comes to the performance score, you can actually detect the Lighthouse user agent. And the thing that you could do, so usually when we have single-page application, the biggest bottleneck are interactive scripts. So you can run SSR code, you can push the HTML, you can remove all the script tags, and just run this code for Lighthouse. And magically you have 100. No matter how much JavaScript you will add, there's still 100. The only issue is, it has absolutely nothing about the real user experience. So after hearing this presentation, you could actually get a perception that I think Lighthouse is useless. This is definitely not my point. I think this is absolutely wonderful thing to use, but only if you know how to use it, in which conditions it works, in which conditions it doesn't, what is the difference between synthetic score, which we saw, or the real world user score that we saw on PageSpeed Insights, so Core Vitals. And the problem is not in the tool itself, but as always in the way how we are using it or misusing it. So Google Lighthouse has contributed to the faster web more than any other tool, and we have to be aware of that. We have to respect that. But the name Lighthouse has its purpose. Its goal is to guide on improving the page quality, not to give definitive answers if this is good or bad. So I've seen websites with great user experience and low Lighthouse score, and terrible user experience and a great Lighthouse score. And you always have to also, you should be aware of the fact that good performance is a trade-off. So 100% is not always the goal, because you need to sacrifice something. Sometimes it's a feature, sometimes it's an analytics script, sometimes it's a short delay that happens when you click on something and you have to lazy load something. Like, there's always a price that you have to pay. So we shouldn't chase Lighthouse score as the ultimate metric. We should look at this, we should be aware of its impact on the performance, but not improve it at all cost. Because in the end, it is a business decision. Like, we are sacrificing something for the sake of something. Maybe you would like to sacrifice this analytics script for the sake of better performance, but maybe it's more important to actually know what our users are doing. It's always a business decision. And to me, Lighthouse shines the most when we want to quickly compare different versions of our website, for example, on the CI/CD pipeline, and see if the general performance decreased or increased. This is super useful in such cases. Also, if you haven't pushed your website really to the real users yet, if you're just building it, it is also great to measure it with Lighthouse, because honestly, you don't have any other tool to measure. You don't have users. You can't ask them. You can collect a real-world user data. So adding Lighthouse to your CI/CD pipelines is actually super useful. There's something called Lighthouse CI that you can check out on GitHub Actions, and with a few clicks, just add it into your CI/CD pipelines. You should also audit websites with similar complexity or from the same sector as yours to get a perception what is a good performance in your particular case. For a blog, I would say everything below 90 is kind of embarrassing. For an e-commerce website, everything above 60 is really good score. So really, you have to be aware where you are, what is good for you. I mean, what is the definition of good in your case, and then chase that. And Lighthouse is definitely not a good tool to measure actual user experience, to measure actual user performance. Synthetic data will never tell you that. Synthetic data is mostly to tell if something is good compared to the previous iteration, or if it is good before you can actually launch the real users. As soon as you have real users, well, use data from the real users. And the good thing is you don't have to set up any additional monitoring tools to actually check that. So we already saw the PageSpeed Insights, and we already saw that it is collecting this data from Chrome, right? So maybe let me tell you a little bit more about that. So again, this data is being collected from the past 30 days, not 28, but 30, using Google Chrome on mobile and on desktop, which means if you're using Safari or some other browser, you're actually not sending this data. If any of you is using Chrome, by default, you're sending it, and please don't disable this feature because it is actually useful for everyone. And in general, you could assume at least that if you have a certain Core Web Vitals from the Chrome devices, probably they're better on Apple devices. So it could be even better than you think it is. And the only requirement for collecting this data is making your website crawlable. So as soon as your website is crawlable, you're automatically starting to collect this data. It is available in PageSpeed Insights, but there's a very nice tool called Chrome User Experience Report. You can Google that. And you can actually use that in Google Data Studio to create very nice dashboards or reports that are actually showing how your performance was changing over time or how it was changing per particular device, etc. And it's all for free. It is already there. Like, you don't need to set up anything. You're just getting to Google Data Studio, checking Chrome User Experience Dashboard, and here it is. So now, before I finish, the final revelation. I keep saying about this difference between so-called lab data and the real-world data, and that measuring in a specific environment, like in a lab environment, to be completely different than measuring in the real-world environment. And here is why. If you do a PageSpeed Insight benchmark on a few websites, you will quickly notice that actually Lighthouse score and the Core Web Vitals could be completely different. So you could have a website that is scoring great Lighthouse score, but is terrible on Core Web Vitals. And very often the reason behind that is, as we know, that they actually cheated a little bit. But you could actually see the other. You could see the opposite. So you could see that the Lighthouse score is terrible, but actually the users that are visiting this website, they may be using high-end devices. They may have access to a very good network. And because of that, there might not be a reason to optimize. So even if you have a score of 60, if you're passing all the Core Web Vitals, there's no reason to optimize. And that would be it. I think you learned something useful. I think it was a little bit thought-provoking. And the bottom line of this talk is just don't trust numbers blindly, any numbers. Understand the underlying context. Understand where those numbers make sense, when those numbers doesn't make sense. And thank you.
Lighthouse. Who knew there was more to learn about it, right? You were not just chasing those green circles.
Yeah.
So, questions. I bet that we have people with a few questions.
Yes, there is a question. Good.
There is a question, Filip.
Yes, I hired him.
Yes, okay. He's going to talk about...
So this is more of a side question, not really related to Lighthouse, but as a Chief Developer Experience Officer, in your day-to-day life, how do you help your coworkers achieve better developer experience? And maybe on the Lighthouse side, how this better developer experience translates into better performance, better code, and so better user experience for the users?
Well, a very sad answer to this question is I actually don't help my coworkers at all to have a better developer experience. Like, I have people for that. My goal is to ensure a good developer experience for our customers, so that our APIs, they are high level enough, they're understandable, we have great documentation, that there are no breaking changes, and if there are breaking changes, there are a great migration path for that. Ensuring good developer experience is actually a very like multi-surface task, which starts with the education and ends on the product itself, on the way how it is maintained, on the way how it is being updated. And I think actually Nuxt is a great example of how to do this right. And I think you agree.
Excellent, thank you for that, Filip. We'll settle up afterwards.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is answering your question. I mean, it is answering your question because I'm not helping my coworkers to have better developer experience, though I could talk a lot about how to ensure good developer experience from the product perspective or from the developer tool perspective. Maybe this would be another talk, maybe next year, or maybe you can just have a chat afterwards. I think we're running out of time.
We have a couple more minutes, Filip, unless you're really eager to get off the stage. Does anyone have any other questions about Lighthouse?
Hi, how do you explain to a customer that the Lighthouse core isn't actually the real user experience with your platform? How do you explain that to someone that sees a circle and says it's not good enough?
Yeah, and that's the problem. Like, it is hard because this is literally my job. Like, I'm constantly talking to our clients and explaining them like what matters, what doesn't matter, etc. But I think the key thing for them to understand is this difference between lab data and real-world data, and what is collected from the users and what is collected from the browser. And ideally, but you rarely have this opportunity, but ideally, if you're constantly optimizing this core and it is changing and you're constantly optimizing core web vitals, you probably also collect business metrics like bounce rate and this sort of things. So if you manage to have those two charts and put them on top of each other, there is very high probability that there will be a correlation between improving core web vitals and actually dropping the bounce rate and this sort of stuff. So this is how I would do this, and this is what we are actually doing for the customers that we have data that we can show for. And if not, I think the most convincing thing is the fact that Lighthouse can be cheated and that Google is actually totally ignoring your Lighthouse score. It is only looking at core web vitals. And if you want an SEO boost, and for business people, SEO, this is a trigger word. If they are hearing SEO boost, then they will follow your advices. And if they will hear no SEO boost, they will just look in a different direction. So this is what I would do.
I have a question while we're waiting for someone else. Would you ever use Lighthouse in a test suite, like in an assertion in your test runner on GitHub or GitLab?
Yes, I would. So I was mentioning this. There is a GitHub action for Lighthouse CI, and you can just Google that and add this into your GitHub workflows. So what you will get is actually a very nice summary of how your Lighthouse score, not only performance one, but in general Lighthouse score, has changed over the deploys. And I would say this is like #1 use case for Lighthouse. Like, put it into your CI, have some understanding of how it was changing over time. Usually you can also see that if the Lighthouse score will decrease, you can actually expect that the core web vitals will also decrease. It will not tell you how much, but it will just tell you that something got worse or something improved. So yeah, do this if you're using GitHub. If you're not using GitHub, no problem, because this is just a CLI tool, so you can actually add this into your CI/CD workflows anywhere. Yes, please. Yes, good. Stand up, don't be shy.
Hey, it's kind of a follow-up question to the previous one. So if you have it in your CI pipeline, then how actionable actually the results are? And so given that they're fluctuating quite noticeably, how often do you get the result that you can actually act upon?
Okay, so Lighthouse, this is a great question actually, and maybe I will be able to show something. Maybe I will be able to show something. So the first part of the answer of this question, they're not that much actionable, really. Honestly, I don't think Lighthouse is the tool that will give you actionable insights on how you should improve your performance, because usually what you will see is like reduce the main thread work, which is super helpful, like extremely helpful. And then you will probably have a link to some compiled bundle, which is also super helpful because we usually just have few files like that. So there are much better tools, and one of them I would really recommend to use is YellowLab. And maybe we will be able to do a demo. I still have 2 minutes. Oh my god, that would be hard. Or maybe I can just stop mirroring. Wait. Daniel, can you tell a joke?
So I recently found out that Swedish warships have an enormous barcode on the top. Looked from above. Do you know why that is? It's so when they bring all the ships back into port, they can Scandinavian.
Okay.
Does that count for that?
I wasn't paying attention, but I see it is successful. So, it's called Yellow Lab. And I kind of cheated. I already linked the real result, but look, like what Yellow Lab is doing, it is actually giving a very actionable response. So we have a global score, which is also between 0 and 100, but this is not the most important thing, because then it is actually testing it against every best practice, like a total weight image optimization, like requests, this sort of stuff. And for each of those, you can actually click, let's say, oh, this is something very bad. So we can click here, and we can actually see what is the problem, like how we can optimize it. So this is extremely actionable. And we can go with those best practices one by one and just try to optimize them. And this is the tool that I am recommending to use when you actually want to optimize your website and get some actionable insights. Definitely when you're building the website and you haven't launched it yet, this is a great checklist, just a checklist to check against. Don't look for checklists on the internet, just use Yellow Labs because it's already there. So yeah.
Amazing. That was a great talk and full of lots of actionable information. Can we have a big round of applause for Filip?
Thank you. Just before we finish, can we do one more Mexican wave? Good, from this side. Put your laptops. Hey. I see someone is not putting her laptop away. We're doing Mexican wave here. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
You're right. It is an amazing experience to see that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Daniel. You can try. You can try.
Okay, we'll do a Mexican wave from the other direction. We're going to stay here for the next 5 to 10 minutes doing this. Okay, 3, 2, 1. The power.
Amazing, right?
It's amazing.
Okay, thank you so much.